When people think about growing old, one of the most common assumptions is that living near your children is the best and safest option. It feels comforting to imagine that your son or daughter will be right down the road, able to check in on you, help with errands, or simply share a meal on Sunday evenings. On the surface, this seems like the natural and obvious choice. After all, family is family, and isn't family supposed to be the ultimate safety net? But what if this seemingly perfect plan carries hidden downsides? What if living close to your children in old age could actually turn out to be a mistake? One that impacts not only your independence but also your relationships, your happiness, and even your children's lives. As you reach your later years, one of the most important questions you face is how you want to live and what kind of support system you need. Our culture often paints an overly simple picture. Either you live near your children, or you end up lonely and isolated. Yet the reality is much more complex. Living near your adult children can bring comfort, yes, but it can also bring tension, dependency, and unspoken expectations that quietly erode the quality of life for everyone involved. To understand why, let's first consider the modern family dynamic. When you were raising your children, you were the center of their world. You provided structure, guidance, and stability. But as they became adults, their world expanded. They developed their own careers, formed their own households, and built lives full of responsibilities that extend far beyond you. If you move close to them in your old age, you are inserting yourself back into the center of a life that already has its own rhythms and obligations. While this might seem natural at first, it can create a delicate balance between closeness and intrusion, between support and dependence. One of the first potential pitfalls is the issue of boundaries. When parents live nearby, it becomes easy for both sides to blur the line between helping and interfering. You might want to see your children and grandchildren often, but they may not always have the time or energy to visit. Or perhaps you stop by unannounced, believing it's harmless, only to discover that it feels intrusive to them. The closeness that was supposed to bring joy can instead create frustration, resentment, or even guilt. Children may feel they are not doing enough for their aging parent, while parents may feel neglected or unappreciated when expectations go unmet. Another challenge is dependency. It's natural to lean on your children when you need support, but living close by can sometimes turn this reliance into an unspoken expectation. Suddenly, your adult child may become your primary caregiver, not because they consciously chose that role, but because proximity made it inevitable. While some children embrace this responsibility, others may feel overwhelmed, especially if they are juggling demanding careers, raising their own children, or managing their own health struggles. The parent-child relationship begins to shift in ways that neither side fully anticipated, and this shift can place enormous emotional strain on both parties. There's also the question of independence. One of the greatest gifts of later life is the freedom to shape your own routines, pursue your own interests, and live according to your own rhythms. But when you move too close to your children, you risk sacrificing this independence. You may begin to schedule your life around theirs, waiting for them to be available, rather than making choices that bring you joy. Instead of forming new friendships, joining community groups, or exploring hobbies, you may rely too heavily on your children for companionship. Over time, this can lead to a narrowing of your world, a quiet shrinking of opportunities that leaves you less fulfilled than you imagined. Then, there is the matter of privacy, something both parents and children may undervalue until it's lost. When you live nearby, the sense of constant availability can weigh heavily on both sides. A child may hesitate to plan a vacation, fearing that their parent will need them while they're gone. A parent may feel hurt if their child doesn't include them in weekend plans, even if it's perfectly reasonable for the child to want time alone with their spouse or friends. These small moments of friction can build up, leading to misunderstandings and strained relationships. What started as an attempt to strengthen family ties can ironically weaken them. Of course, it's important to acknowledge that there are benefits to living close to your children. Shared meals, more frequent contact, and easier access to help in emergencies can all be wonderful. But the mistake lies in assuming that proximity automatically equals happiness or security. In truth, happiness in old age often comes not from relying on your children, but from building a broader, more balanced support system. This might include friendships, community connections, professional caregivers, and most importantly, the cultivation of your own independence. Living too close to your children can also limit their growth as much as it limits yours. Adult children need the freedom to build their own traditions, raise their families according to their own values, and make choices without feeling they are constantly under the watchful eye of their parents. When parents live nearby, children may feel pressure to involve them in every holiday, every birthday, every major decision. While this can create closeness, it can also breed resentment. Children may begin to feel trapped, unable to fully spread their wings because their parents' needs and expectations hover too close. It's also worth considering how geographic closeness can impact conflict resolution. When you live far apart, disagreements often fade with distance. A tense phone call can be smoothed over with time apart. But when you live nearby, every unresolved conflict has the potential to fester. You see each other at the grocery store, at the school concert, at the neighborhood gathering, and the tension lingers. Instead of cooling off, conflicts can intensify because proximity doesn't allow space for emotions to settle. Perhaps the most overlooked downside of living too close to your children in old age is the lost opportunity for personal growth. Later life can be a time of extraordinary discovery if you allow it to be. You can travel, form new friendships, learn new skills, and redefine yourself beyond the role of parent. But if your world shrinks to the orbit of your children, you may miss these opportunities. Instead of expanding in richness and meaning, your later years can quietly contract into routines that revolve around waiting for your children to call, to visit, or to invite you over. So is living close to your children always a mistake? Not necessarily, but it can be. If the decision is made out of fear rather than freedom, out of habit rather than intention. If you move close to them expecting that they will be your primary source of happiness, support, and identity, you may be setting yourself up for disappointment. The key is balance, staying connected to your children while also building a life that is fully your own. Another subtle but very real problem with living close to your children in old age is the way it reshapes identity. For decades, you've been more than just a parent. You've had a career, friendships, passions, and personal goals. Aging provides a chance to rediscover those parts of yourself, to live in a way that reflects who you truly are beyond the parental role. But when you choose to live right next door to your children, the gravitational pull of mom or dad becomes hard to escape. Every visit, every errand, every interaction reaffirms that role and can unintentionally overshadow your chance to grow as an independent individual. In your later years, it's also worth noting that children often underestimate how much they may change when their parents are nearby. At first, they may welcome the idea. They might say, "Yes, come live close. It'll be so nice to have you around." And truly, they may mean it. But life is dynamic. A new job opportunity could come up, their spouse could develop different needs, or their own children may require increasing amounts of time and attention. Suddenly, the warm invitation to live nearby transforms into a complicated reality. Your presence, once cherished, may start to feel like another responsibility they must manage. Even if they love you deeply, the pressures of life can strain their ability to balance your needs with their own. Another major concern is how this decision impacts grandchildren. While many grandparents dream of being deeply involved in their grandchildren's lives, living too close can blur the lines between support and overstepping. Children often need space to parent their own kids without interference, but when grandparents are always available, it becomes easy to unintentionally cross boundaries. This might mean giving advice that wasn't asked for, or expecting to be included in family decisions that are really the parent's responsibility. Though your intention may be to help, the outcome can sometimes create tension rather than harmony. And what about your own emotional resilience? One of the most important skills we can cultivate in old age is adaptability, the ability to adjust when life throws changes our way. If you build your world around your children, you risk putting all your emotional eggs in one basket. If they move away for a new opportunity, you may feel lost. If their lives become too busy, you may feel forgotten. And if, heaven forbid, conflict drives a wedge in the relationship, your entire support system may collapse overnight. By living independently and cultivating a broader circle of relationships, you safeguard yourself against these vulnerabilities. Financial implications also come into play. Many older adults decide to relocate closer to their children by purchasing or renting a home nearby. But real estate markets fluctuate, and the cost of moving can be significant. If you buy a home in your child's neighborhood and later discover the arrangement isn't working, you may find yourself stuck in a financial bind. Selling again, moving again, or trying to find an affordable alternative may not be easy, especially on a fixed income. In contrast, choosing a location based on your own needs, such as access to healthcare, social opportunities, and amenities, gives you far more stability in the long run. There's also the danger of limiting your social world to your family alone. It's tempting to think, my children and grandchildren will be enough, but countless studies on aging show the opposite. Seniors who thrive in old age are the ones who maintain diverse social networks. Friends, community groups, clubs, religious communities, or volunteer organizations all provide unique forms of connection that children cannot replace. Living too close to your children may make it easy to neglect these broader relationships, leaving you vulnerable to loneliness if family dynamics shift. On a psychological level, children may also struggle with role reversal. As parents age and rely more on their children, the natural dynamic flips. The child becomes the caretaker, and the parent becomes dependent. While this shift is inevitable to some degree, proximity accelerates it. When you live nearby, your child may start to feel like they are always on call. Even small requests, a ride to the doctor, help with groceries, assistance with technology, can add up, especially when repeated week after week. Without realizing it, the child may begin to feel overwhelmed or resentful, which can quietly erode the warmth of your bond. Let's also consider the cultural factor. In many societies, multi-generational living is still common, and in some contexts, it works beautifully. But in much of the modern Western world, the pace of life is different. Children are balancing careers, raising their own families, and sometimes even supporting aging in-laws simultaneously. The expectation that they can seamlessly integrate their parents into this already demanding equation often proves unrealistic. Parents may feel disappointed when their children can't provide as much attention as expected, and children may feel guilt for not being able to meet those expectations. The result is mutual frustration instead of mutual support. A subtle but significant issue arises when parents move close to one child in particular. What message does that send to the other siblings? Favoritism, whether real or perceived, can fuel family conflict that lingers for years. Brothers and sisters may resent the one who has mom nearby, or feel relieved of responsibility in ways that ultimately fracture family unity. Meanwhile, the child living closest may carry an unfair share of the caregiving burden, whether they volunteered for it or not. Proximity can skew family dynamics in ways that ripple outward, creating tensions that would never have existed otherwise. Another often overlooked challenge is the way proximity impacts your children's marriage or partnership. When one spouse's parent lives nearby, the other spouse may feel like an outsider in their own family. Even if your intentions are pure, your presence may create pressure, subtle competition for time, or disagreements over how much involvement is appropriate. It's not uncommon for in-laws to quietly resent how much time and attention an elderly parent demands, especially when that time comes at the expense of the couple's relationship. Over time, this dynamic can strain the marriage, leaving you feeling guilty or even alienated. And let's not forget the emotional toll on you as a parent. You may find yourself constantly waiting for invitations or inclusion. Even if your children are attentive, the natural rhythm of their lives may not match your hopes. They may be too busy to visit regularly or too exhausted after work to stop by. You may sit by the window, watching the neighborhood and hoping for a knock on the door. That disappointment, repeated over time, can weigh heavily on your spirit. Instead of feeling grateful for the closeness, you may feel more acutely aware of the distance that still exists, not physical, but emotional. This brings us to a deeper truth. Physical proximity does not guarantee emotional closeness. In fact, sometimes it does the opposite. When you live far away, every visit is special, every phone call is intentional, and every moment carries weight. You make the effort to connect, and that effort builds value. But when you live nearby, interactions can become routine, even perfunctory. "I'll stop by tomorrow" becomes a promise that's easily broken. "We'll see you soon" turns into weeks without contact because the assumption is that there's always another day. Ironically, being too close can make you invisible, taken for granted, or overlooked. One of the hardest lessons to accept in old age is that your children are not meant to be the center of your world anymore. For decades, they were. You woke up thinking about them, you worked hard to provide for them, and your life revolved around their needs, dreams, and safety. But when they grow up, the healthiest thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to release them into their own independence. When you choose to live right next door or down the street, you sometimes unknowingly tether them back to a role they have already outgrown. They become once again the center of your daily routine, and you become a constant presence in theirs. This can make it harder for both generations to fully embrace the season of life they are meant to be in. Consider, for example, the child in their 40s or 50s who is building a career, raising teenagers, paying a mortgage, and trying to manage the chaos of modern life. If you live nearby, every time you need help with something small, they may feel obligated to add it to their already full plate. To you, the request feels minor. Can you take me to the pharmacy? Can you look at this bill? But to them, it's one more responsibility in a never-ending list. The result is that your presence, rather than being a comfort, can start to feel like a weight. And you, in turn, may sense that weight in their tone, their hurried visits, or their distracted responses. Slowly, resentment creeps into the relationship from both sides. It's also important to remember that children and parents have different social rhythms. Older adults often prefer slower, more deliberate connections, long visits, meaningful conversations, unhurried meals. But middle-aged adults, caught up in the demands of work and parenting, often have to keep their interactions short and efficient. Living nearby can magnify these differences. You may crave more frequent or deeper contact, while your children may only have the capacity for quick check-ins. Both sides end up feeling unsatisfied. You feel neglected, they feel pressured. If you lived farther away, the expectations might be more realistic, and each interaction could feel more intentional. Another hidden downside of living too close is how it limits your ability to adapt to change. Life is unpredictable. What if your child gets a job offer in another state? What if their spouse's family needs them more urgently? What if circumstances force them to move? If your entire world is built around their presence, a relocation can feel devastating. You may find yourself having to uproot your own life all over again, perhaps at a stage when moving is physically and emotionally more difficult. On the other hand, if you had chosen to settle in a community that met your own needs, rather than simply following your children, you would be more resilient, no matter where life took them. There's also a subtle psychological trap in living near your children. The illusion of security. You might think, if anything happens, they'll be right here. But emergencies don't always work that way. Your child might be traveling, at work, or busy with their own responsibilities when you need them most. And if you've relied too heavily on them for support, you may not have built the alternative systems, friends, neighbors, community programs, or professional caregivers that could actually help when it matters. Ironically, by living close to your children, you might invest less in building these wider safety nets, leaving yourself more vulnerable, not less. On the emotional side, proximity can sometimes amplify disappointment. When you live far away, you might only expect to see your children during the holidays or a few times a year. When they show up, the reunion feels joyful and special. But when you live nearby, the expectations rise dramatically. You think, surely they'll stop by once a week. And when they don't, it stings more sharply because they are so close and yet absent. That absence feels more personal, more like rejection, even when it's not. This quiet cycle of hope and letdown can erode your emotional well-being over time. We must also talk about autonomy. Older adults who stay independent longer tend to report higher life satisfaction. Independence doesn't mean isolation. It means maintaining control over your own decisions, your time, and your energy. But living close to your children can erode that independence in subtle ways. You may start to second-guess your choices, worrying about how they will react. You may avoid making plans without consulting them, or you may feel pressure to conform to their routines. Slowly, without realizing it, you hand over the steering wheel of your life. And once autonomy slips away, it is very difficult to reclaim. Another factor to consider is the generational gap. Even the closest families experience differences in values, habits, and lifestyle. You may prefer quiet evenings while they enjoy noisy gatherings. You may have strong opinions on child rearing while they embrace new methods. When you live nearby, these differences show up more often and more vividly. Little disagreements about diet, discipline, or lifestyle can escalate into ongoing conflicts simply because you are always present. In contrast, distance often softens these differences, allowing each generation to live according to their own rhythm without constant comparison. For many seniors, living near children is motivated by fear of loneliness. This is understandable. Loneliness is one of the biggest challenges in old age. But solving loneliness by depending on your children alone is like trying to fill a well with just one bucket of water. The healthier approach is to build multiple streams of connection. Join a book club, volunteer, take classes, or attend community events. These outlets not only reduce loneliness, but also enrich your life with variety and growth. If you rely exclusively on your children to meet your social needs, you place enormous pressure on them and leave yourself vulnerable to disappointment. There's also the question of how your presence affects their children, your grandchildren. While being a nearby grandparent can be wonderful, it can also complicate family dynamics. Your grandchildren may come to depend on you for things that are better handled by their parents. Or they may feel caught in the middle if tensions arise between you and their mom or dad. In some cases, they may even pull away, seeking independence from what feels like too much involvement. As hard as it is to admit, too much closeness can sometimes weaken the bond rather than strengthen it. Another scenario worth considering is how living nearby can create competition with your child's in-laws. If both sets of grandparents live in the same city, family events can become a delicate balancing act. Your child and their spouse may feel torn between households, constantly trying to split time fairly. Even if you don't intend it, your presence may intensify these pressures. Instead of enjoying harmonious family gatherings, you may find yourself silently measuring how much time they spend with you versus the other side of the family. These comparisons rarely lead to happiness. The truth is, later life offers an extraordinary chance to design your own environment intentionally. You can choose where to live based on climate, affordability, healthcare access, walkability, and community opportunities. But if your only criterion is near my children, you may sacrifice all these other factors. You could end up in a place that doesn't support your health, your interests, or your finances, just because it keeps you geographically close. Over time, this decision can backfire, leaving you less happy and less fulfilled than if you had chosen a place that truly met your needs. Ultimately, the biggest mistake many seniors make is believing that physical proximity guarantees emotional closeness, security, or happiness. The reality is more nuanced. Yes, being near your children can be wonderful if it's built on clear boundaries, mutual respect, and realistic expectations. But if it's driven by fear, guilt, or unspoken hopes, it often creates more challenges than it solves. There's another angle that's rarely discussed: how living close to your children in old age can affect your sense of dignity. Dignity is about being respected, about being seen as capable, and about maintaining a sense of agency in your own life. When you are geographically close to your children, small acts of assistance, picking up groceries, paying bills, driving you to appointments, can accumulate until you begin to feel dependent in ways that erode your dignity. You may even begin to question your own abilities, deferring decisions to your children simply because they are there. While their intentions may be loving, the effect on your confidence can be profound. Distance, on the other hand, forces you to maintain a higher degree of self-reliance. It encourages you to plan, to adapt, and to use resources beyond your family. You might rely on delivery services, community transportation, or trusted neighbors. These solutions may seem small, but they allow you to preserve both independence and dignity. Living too close to your children often removes that necessity, and with it, the pride that comes from managing your own affairs. Another subtle danger of living nearby is the risk of becoming an emotional crutch. Your children may start turning to you for support in ways that place you back in the parental role. You might find yourself once again solving their problems, mediating their conflicts, or even carrying their emotional burdens. While being a source of comfort is part of the beauty of family, it can also keep both generations from fully embracing their appropriate roles. You deserve a season of rest and self-discovery, not one where you are still carrying the weight of everyone else's struggles simply because you live down the street. There's also the matter of lifestyle compatibility. Your idea of a peaceful retirement may not align with your children's fast-paced routine. You may long for quiet mornings and unhurried afternoons while they thrive on constant activity. Living nearby forces these worlds to overlap more often than they might comfortably fit. When your lives are too entangled, even differences in diet, schedules, or hobbies can create friction. What feels like a harmless preference, such as preferring dinner at 5 p.m. instead of 7, can snowball into ongoing irritation simply because you are interacting so often. Healthcare access is another practical factor that gets overlooked. Many seniors choose to live close to children, even if the area lacks quality medical facilities. They assume their children's presence will make up for it. But what happens when serious health issues arise and specialized care is not available nearby? Suddenly, you may find yourself facing long drives, stressful logistics, or the possibility of relocating yet again. In contrast, choosing a retirement location based on healthcare availability ensures that your needs will be met regardless of your children's proximity. And let's talk about friendships. Friendships in old age are not just nice to have. They are essential for mental, emotional, and even physical health. Studies consistently show that seniors with strong social networks live longer, happier lives. When you move primarily to be near your children, you may neglect building these networks. You might think, I don't need friends here. I have family, but your children's lives are busy, and they cannot be your sole companions. Without friendships of your own, you may find yourself increasingly isolated, even while living just blocks away from family. Another overlooked issue is how moving close to your children can unintentionally limit their freedom. Suppose your child receives an exciting job offer in another city. If you live far away, they might accept without hesitation. But if you live nearby, they may feel guilty about leaving you. Your presence becomes a factor in every major decision they make. While they may never admit it openly, the unspoken weight of your proximity can keep them from pursuing opportunities they otherwise would. In a sense, you risk chaining them to the same location, not out of malice, but simply because of the emotional burden of being nearby. This also applies to their personal relationships. Adult children need time and space to nurture their marriages, raise their kids, and develop friendships of their own. When parents live nearby, children may feel torn between meeting their parents' expectations and investing fully in their own lives. Over time, this tension can weaken their marriage or limit their ability to build a robust social life. Your closeness, though born out of love, may unintentionally restrict their growth. Consider, too, how living nearby can affect family traditions. When you live farther away, family gatherings become special events. Holidays are planned carefully, everyone looks forward to them, and they often carry a sense of excitement and meaning. But when you live nearby, traditions can lose their sparkle. Instead of one or two deeply meaningful visits, the frequent but less intentional contact can dilute the joy of those occasions. Holidays may feel less like celebrations and more like obligations. In the long run, this can leave both you and your children less satisfied. There is also the risk of unequal caregiving expectations among siblings. If you live close to one child, they naturally become the default caregiver, while others, who live farther away, may step back. This imbalance can create resentment, guilt, or family conflict. The child who lives nearby may feel trapped by responsibilities they didn't fully choose, while distant siblings may feel excluded or unfairly relieved of their share of the duty. Over time, these dynamics can fracture family harmony. A deeper philosophical issue lies in how we define the role of aging itself. Old age is not meant to be a return to childhood, where we rely entirely on others to meet our needs. It is meant to be a stage of life where wisdom, perspective, and freedom come into full bloom. When you tether yourself too tightly to your children, you risk missing that opportunity. Instead of exploring who you are beyond the roles of worker, spouse, or parent, you may revert to dependence, living a smaller, narrower life than you deserve. Perhaps the biggest irony is that living close to your children often does not protect you from loneliness in the way you imagine. You can live 5 minutes away and still feel profoundly alone if your expectations for connection do not match reality. Loneliness is not solved by geography. It is solved by meaningful relationships, purposeful living, and active engagement with the world. A neighbor who waves at you every morning, a friend who meets you for coffee, or a group you volunteer with weekly can provide more consistent companionship than children who are always busy. So, what's the alternative? It is not about cutting ties with your children or avoiding them altogether. It's about balance. It's about recognizing that the healthiest relationships between parents and adult children are those built on respect, choice, and mutual freedom, not constant proximity. Living at a comfortable distance gives both generations the space to thrive while still allowing for closeness that is chosen, not imposed. Let's now turn to the heart of the matter. What does a wise and fulfilling alternative look like? If living too close to your children can create dependency, strain, and disappointment, what steps can you take to design an old age that is rich, balanced, and genuinely joyful? The key lies in building a life centered not on proximity, but on purpose. First, think about choosing a location that fits your personal needs. Instead of asking, "Where do my children live?" ask yourself, "Where will I thrive?" That might mean a community with strong healthcare services, A climate that suits your health, access to cultural events, or neighborhoods designed for walkability. By selecting a place based on your own priorities, you ensure that your daily life remains fulfilling, even when your children are not around. Second, cultivate independence as a gift to both yourself and your children. Independence does not mean refusing help. It means creating systems that allow you to live confidently without constant reliance on family. This could include hiring occasional home assistance, using delivery services for groceries and medications, or exploring local transportation options. The more capable you remain in handling your own needs, the lighter your relationship with your children will feel, free of guilt, obligation, or resentment. Third, invest deeply in community. Join local clubs, faith groups, or volunteer organizations where you can contribute meaningfully. Purpose is one of the most powerful antidotes to loneliness. When you are part of a community that values your presence, you feel needed, appreciated, and connected. These bonds can sustain you in ways that family alone cannot. A balanced support network also ensures that if your children move, your happiness does not move with them. Another vital step is to create clear boundaries with your children. If you do live nearby, be intentional about how you interact. Avoid dropping by unannounced. Set realistic expectations about visits and respect their need for space. Encourage them to pursue their own lives fully, without guilt or pressure. The healthiest family dynamics are those in which love is freely given, not demanded. By respecting boundaries, you allow affection to flourish rather than suffocate. It's also essential to embrace technology as a tool for connection. Today's seniors have access to video calls, messaging apps, and social media, which allow for meaningful contact even across long distances. You can see your grandchildren grow, share stories with your children, and remain an active part of their lives without needing to live in the same neighborhood. Distance, when bridged with technology, can still feel like closeness, without the drawbacks of constant physical presence. Another overlooked part of aging well is legacy. Ask yourself, what do I want to leave behind? Is it memories of a parent who was constantly dependent? Or is it the image of someone who lived with courage, wisdom, and joy? By choosing independence, by seeking purpose beyond your children, you model for them a powerful example of how to age gracefully. That legacy is far more valuable than any number of nearby visits or errands. And don't underestimate the importance of novelty. Old age does not need to be a time of retreat. It can be a time of new beginnings. Learn a new language, take up painting, travel if you can, or start projects you once postponed. By keeping your world large and dynamic, you ensure that your children are not your only source of stimulation. This makes your conversations with them richer and more engaging, because you bring fresh experiences and insights to share. Another practical tip is to plan openly for the future. Talk with your children about your wishes for healthcare, living arrangements, and end-of-life care. The more transparent you are, the less burden they will feel later. These conversations may be uncomfortable, but they prevent misunderstandings and resentment down the road. By taking responsibility for your own planning, you show respect for their lives and give them the freedom to support you out of love, not obligation. There is also immense value in redefining what closeness really means. True closeness is not about how many miles separate you. It's about the quality of the bond you share. You can live across the country and feel deeply connected if your relationship is built on love, respect, and intentional communication. Conversely, you can live on the same street and feel distant if your interactions are marked by guilt, expectation, or resentment. Focus on nurturing the emotional closeness, and the physical distance will matter far less. Now, let's acknowledge something important. Not all seniors who move near their children regret it. For some families, it works beautifully. But what makes it work is not geography alone. It's balance, boundaries, and mutual respect. If you are considering such a move, ask yourself hard questions. Am I doing this out of fear or out of freedom? Am I expecting my children to meet all my needs, or am I prepared to build a life of my own here? Am I willing to respect their independence as much as I hope they will respect mine? The truth is, the healthiest parent-child relationships in later life are the ones that are chosen, not imposed. When children visit because they want to, not because they have to, love thrives. When parents maintain their own lives, their own friendships, and their own independence, children feel free to embrace their role as loving companions rather than reluctant caretakers. By resisting the urge to live too close, you may actually preserve the joy, intimacy, and respect that matter most. So, why could living close to your children in old age be a big mistake? Because it risks entangling your happiness too tightly with theirs. It risks turning love into obligation, freedom into burden, and closeness into conflict. But when you recognize these risks and choose a path that honors both your independence and theirs, you create space for a relationship that is not only sustainable, but also deeply fulfilling. Old age is not the end of life. It is a new chapter. And like every chapter, it deserves to be written with intention. You have the chance to build a life that reflects your wisdom, your passions, and your values. You have the chance to show your children what true resilience and fulfillment look like. And sometimes that means loving them best from a healthy distance. Because in the end, proximity is not the same as connection. Connection comes from presence of heart, not presence of body. It comes from respect, not obligation. It comes from the freedom to choose one another day after day. And that, more than anything else, is what will keep your family bond strong. Not the number of steps between your door and theirs, but the depth of love you share across whatever distance life requires.